Today we're going to talk a little bit about women in tech and diversity in tech. And I'm lucky to be joined by some really great folks that are going to talk about this subject. I really believe that diversity in the workplace is really, really important for a variety of reasons. Everything from the code we are writing is built with biases in it today that favor those that are white males for facial recognition, for example, and have algorithms that favor specific groups and specific people. We need diversity within the workplace to make sure that these things are addressed appropriately. Opening up all that talent pool is going to bring in better talent, better resources, new ideas, new innovation that's critical to advancing technology, which we all know is so key to our world today. First, I just want to introduce everybody very, very briefly, and then we'll get right into the topics here. So we have Jo Summer Fung, and she is the communications director at Bamboo Technologies. She received her master's in communications from Kansas State. So really a great resource in the community and someone that we can all look up to. Bridget Winston is doing some consulting now, has a long history of working in technology. I had the honor of working with her at multiple stops along the way. She's a dual major from the University of Alabama, Birmingham in English, Lit, and Spanish. Not sure how she ended up in tech. We're going to find out here in just a minute. And is working on her MBA at Pepperdine. And then last but not least, Lisa Del Real is the VP of Global Partners Programs at RingCentral. She's a graduate of Stanford University, a major in electrical engineering, and really knew what she was going to do from the beginning. So she might have a little bit easier time with this first question, which is, what drew you to tech? And how did you end up in this field? And so we'll go ahead and let Lisa start because Lisa started in the industry, and then we'll let everybody kind of follow her lead. So Lisa, can you give us a word?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me and hosting. I'm very happy to match the gift from RingCentral. It's such an important initiative to increase the number of females and diversity in the workplace. So thank you, Matrix. Thank you, Kyle, for supporting that as well. So to start off with, I was fortunate to have mentors during high school that introduced me to engineering. At first, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like every other high school student. I just wanted to go to college, not sure what to major in, but they encouraged me to attend boot camps and to attend different camps for engineering, and it just appealed to me. Everything's black and white, it's ones and zeros. There's no gray area, and to me, that gave me great comfort. From there on, the rest is history. I applied to Stanford and was able to finish my degree there in electrical engineering. I've stayed in technology for the last 20-some years since I've graduated. Not always directly coding. I did start as a software engineer, and now I just work in technology. And I felt that that background in engineering has helped me think. It's just been important as I manage a very complex program, and just to be operationally minded was all due to that education I received. So there you go.
Bridget, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know that I was necessarily drawn to tech per se, but I was always drawn to sales. I was a competitor always. I was a soccer player in college. I was always captain. So I loved leading and I loved competing. So I was always knew that I was going to be in a sales capacity. It would just fit with my personality. But as I rose throughout the sales ranks, and most recently I was a chief revenue officer at a company called Shutterstock, what I loved about that element of that sales role was it allowed me to own both the sales side of things as well as the customer success side of things. So I could really balance that competition side of things in the tech world with winning deals, and then also the ongoing relationship with a customer. So the SaaS world really works with my personality, where I can get that competitive edge in winning new business, but also continue that relationship, that emotional kind of relationship and connection with a customer, and ensuring that we're executing on what we said we were going to do when we sold to them. So it actually ended up being a fit, although maybe not the route I would have expected.
Great, thank you, Bridget. Joel?
Hi, my name is Jo Fang, and thank you all for having me here. And I really appreciate the GoFundMe campaign as well, as a volunteer speaker for Portland Women in Tech organizations. So I accidentally got into tech, but before I got into tech, I was a communications major person in the US. And growing up in China, I was impacted by my dad. He's a very big nerd. So like as soon as like in the 90s, as soon as computers become available to the general population in China, he would just like, we're gonna get that. So I was very fortunate to be one of the kids in China had access to a computer and then internet, etc. The way I got into tech was because of my language skills. I speak Mandarin and Cantonese, and the tech companies I worked for before, they needed that. They need someone to explore the Chinese market. I think a few years ago, I'm not sure if there were enough Chinese-speaking people in Portland Metro. So that's basically what got me in tech is my language skills.
Great, and let's go ahead and continue with you. What unique challenges did you encounter as you learned the IT industry and the tech industry that maybe are a little different than things you've encountered elsewhere? Joe, I'm just going to continue with you, sorry.
Oh, sure. Sorry. I didn't get a cue. Ironically, it was language. As a communications person, I always like kind of academic. But in tech, there was so many acronyms and jargons that I absolutely have no idea what they are. And so I just felt embarrassed all the time the first couple of years in tech, and I just constantly Google, because I was too embarrassed to ask. As an English second language person, I'm like, I need to know that. I feel like everyone knows it except me. So that was actually the biggest challenge for me when I entered the tech industry, was language and the jargons.
Yeah, for me, it was more of self-doubt. When I started, especially at RingCentral 10 years ago, the cloud was new. People couldn't even spell cloud back then, much less UCaaS. And I remember we had a joke at the office when people were like, where's the cloud? Customers or partners would ask. It's like somewhere out in Nevada, in desert Nevada. It was simpler to say that and try to explain on data servers. But I think that's an important lesson that I learned, a challenge that I was able to overcome, is having that confidence and just forging forward, right? Not staying positive, and hard work pays off. And now I was one of the founding employees of the channel, and now cloud is so ubiquitous in our life. So I think for me, I would just narrow it down to that self-doubt.
Oh yeah, let me build on that, because I think that was the unique challenge about being a woman in tech, or a woman in leadership in general. I think at times you have that imposter syndrome or that self-doubt that can come in. For me, I was always the youngest person, sometimes the youngest person leading my team, my entire team. Sometimes, obviously with an English Spanish major, I had to learn the tech. So sometimes I was leading people who knew much more on the technical side than I ever would. And so getting comfortable with leading a team of functions that maybe I did not know personally, that became one of the unique challenges in growing. The other thing that I would say on that self-doubt kind of topic is, I remember there was one time that there was a director level position, and I was a manager at the time. And I was a manager leading and managing 4 of our national accounts. And there was a director level position that became available for managing 6 of those accounts, 4 of the ones that I was managing and 2 additional ones. And I looked at my husband and was like, I don't know that I can go for that role. I haven't managed all 6 of these accounts. And mind you, there were like 5 other guys that were going for the role who had never managed any of the accounts. And my husband looked at me and he's like, the only person who should be going for this role is you. Right. And so it was just one of those things where you have to have someone sort of talk some sense into you at some points, because you wouldn't, people wouldn't necessarily think that all of us would have that. A lot of people would never think, oh, she's a girl filled with self-doubt. But there are those elements where you have that, and you have to, kind of be jolted out to go, yeah, that's right, I'm the natural fit for that promotion. So I think that was one of the unique challenges that I had kind of coming up.
It's great insight. Thank you. You know, one of the things that I think we're all learning, and as a white male, I'm always learning, is the whole mansplaining thing, right? So that's kind of a thing that's out there today, and I know that there is a common thread that I've heard in that your voices aren't heard well at times. So funny you wanted to contribute on that particular topic and maybe give an example of when your voice wasn't heard and how you responded to it, and what strategies people could use to make sure their voice is heard at the end of the day, because it's important.
I guess I'll start on this one. So typically I have a very loud voice, and usually, usually my voice is heard. Maybe sometimes, however, my style hasn't been welcome, potentially. But I still feel like the bravery of actually ensuring that you are speaking is important. A lot of times we sit back. The whole point of that lean in, book is, make sure that you're part of the conversation, that you're not the one who's taking notes in a meeting filled with equals, because that's something, you have the best handwriting, you should take the notes. And so there's little insidious things like that I think are really important. I have been called honey when sitting in a room, when I'm the highest ranking woman in the room, so there's little things like that. And what I find helps is that bravery to say, wow, I have, the last time I was called honey was my grandmother, in Texas calling me that, so using a little humor to diffuse the situation, but having the bravery to say it. I think also ensuring that you have allies in the room is another element too, that I think was important. Finding someone, I think it's just as important for the people of whoever the dominant, whether it's gender or race or whatever it might be in the room, is also on your side too, finding an ally within the room, and having that person can also, kind of back you up and be like, yeah, hey man, that's not okay. So that's always been a tactic I've used.
Lisa, Joe,
Yeah.
anything you'd want to add to that? Yeah, sorry.
On the flip side, being that ally for other women, because many times I'm sure the panelists can agree that you witness this happening. It might not happen to you in particular. And being able to be kind and brave, to Bridget's point, and raise that issue and open up the discussion. I think that's what's important. We do tend to be quiet and humble and not advocate for ourselves, but not only advocate for ourselves, but for the other women in the room, I think is really important.
Joe, any advice for men in the room as far as what they could do to support?
Me? Yeah, I agree with Bridget and Lisa 100%. And I strongly agree with Bridget that if you have an ally, that's great, use them. So I guess my advice for white men in the room, I wish I could see you. It's a little bizarre. That I cannot see everyone. But if I imagine I'm seeing a bunch of white men in the room and trying to understand what's going on here and trying to show support, I will say you can do some bravery as well, and to be a real ally. And when you see something, you actually say something. And especially for men in power, I believe real change comes from up down. If leadership takes the lead actually and say, we support our women, then I think that's where real allyship stands. So that would be my advice, is to be a real ally.
These are all great answers. Thank you guys. It's fantastic. A little on a different topic, but kind of on the same vein, is just, what do you consider the keys to your success, Lisa? What do you think has led you to the place you are today? I mean, you're far more successful than many of your male peers. And what is it that you've done that has set you apart?
First of all, staying positive. We come across many challenges in our personal lives, at work. I think that's really been first and foremost key to my success. I love what I do. I love my team. I love the space we're in. The work that I do is challenging every day. There's creativity I get to use. I think you have to have that passion day in and day out to keep going, and hard work. I mean, if there's anything that really defines at least in my career here at Ring Central, is the hard work I put in to help build the company, build the channel. I started as a channel manager. So if you imagine looking to where I'm now, I think that all that has paid off, but I do it with joy and passion. And so that's how I would chalk it up.
Great. Bridget, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo that. I do think the hard work, I think that bravery and grit are key elements to that success. That word is a word that gets thrown around a lot. I think Angela Duckworth wrote a whole book about it, but the grit aspect, I think, is really important. Like when you get knocked down, how do you view it? Is it growth mindset or fixed mindset? Oh, I guess I'll never be good at this, or is this something that I can continue to improve upon? I think not letting that first fall or failure make you doubt yourself to actually continue. One of the things I think I mentioned that I was always the youngest person in the room. So what that led me to do was make all of my decisions as data centric as possible, as opposed to my gut or my experience, because I couldn't rely on that. So I had to make all of the decisions very data centric. And I think that, especially as a female leader, when you might get accused of being emotional, it's always good to have mounds of data to back up whatever opinion you're going to have. So I think that actually was an advantage to me starting off with that bias, and thinking that I had to kind of overcome that in some way. The other thing I will say, it is important to be likable and to collaborate. And that's one of those things that people say, oh gosh, the likability factor for a female. But it is important to actually be like, I would argue that it's important for for men and women, but people want to work with people they like. So I do think it's important. Don't let your desire to be viewed as tough and a driver impact your likability, because I do think you can do both.
Yeah, I agree. I think the way I define my success is actually, as an immigrant, after like 10 years living in this country, the one thing I feel proud of is I still know who I am. And because there was a lot of distractions in this world, and as someone who was trying to find my place in tech, and as a woman in this white male dominant world, I definitely went through my struggles and kind of like a lot of self-doubt. I think we mentioned imposter syndrome before. And for me, also mentioned earlier, I was very afraid of asking questions because I thought everyone knows it except me. So I think after all these years, the key to my success is like, how do I keep my integrity and remember who I am, and remember that I have all the tools I need. I am intellectual, I am empathetic, I'm a team player, etc. Like I have all the elements that lead me to where I am today. So I think that that's my key. It's yeah, it's just work and that kind of mentality there.
So with your experience, obviously coming from the perspective of language, and the diversity that you bring actually brought you into tech in some ways, which is kind of a unique thing. Have you experienced any special challenges or special things that have occurred to you different than maybe other panelists on this because you have immigrated here or because of your skin color?
Yeah, it is. Thank you for that question. I think there are many occasions where first of all, they will always ask me where I am from. Like that's like, even until today, like these days in Portland, is a very white society here, is people always assume that I'm not from here, which is true. But the fact that everyone has to ask me in different settings, professionally or not, that's just kind of like, okay, here we go again. And another thing is also kind of language related, is people always say, your English is so good. Like I've been working for 7 years now, I kind of know how to write an email. I kind of know how to articulate and, you know, to tell you what I'm thinking and negotiate, etc. Like I do know what I'm talking about. So it's that kind of like not ill intention, but kind of condescending. Like I didn't expect you that you can do what you do right now. So I guess that's just different experience as someone from a different country.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. There is kind of a emphasis almost like, oh, you are actually good at this, as though you wouldn't have been.
Right.
And that gives you some sort of special status, which doesn't make sense. So that's very strange, but
Yeah.
a unique
And
experience you probably have.
yeah, I will add, and I look really young. Like no one takes me seriously until they know exactly who I am.
Yeah.
So that's another thing.
Yeah, something that I think all of you have experienced at different times, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, can you tell me what advice you'd give employers? Because obviously you're an employer yourself. When looking to add diversity to their staff, where to look, how to you know, attract that type of talent, programs, things like that. I know that, you know, maybe different perks or different ways of approaching it are important when trying to add diversity to your staff. So what sort of clues could you give us to be better at this?
Right. There's so much, but I would say it comes from the top down, right? Your leadership team has to make it a priority, and that has to cascade to the rest of the organization. And by being intentional, it's infectious, right? And it has to be part of the DNA of the company. Something that I know is a little bit controversial is unconscious bias at the stage of our political environment. However, I do believe it's important in educating your hiring managers, whether when they're interviewing people of all sorts, right? Making sure it's inclusive, and also even simple as when you write a job posting, ensuring that you're using language that's inclusive and not in any way biased to one gender or another. I know here at RingCentral, we've started affinity groups and focused on women leaders. There's affinity groups around different minorities as well. And by having your employees feel comfortable bringing their authentic selves to your organization day in, day out, that's just gonna feed into hiring more like-minded people. So those are some of the things we've employed here at RingCentral that we're passionate about. I'm sure the ladies on the panel probably have other recommendations to make. Bridget, I don't know what would you like to bring into the conversation?
Well, I think perfect segue there, because I think especially with things like the Black Lives Matter protests that came up recently, although it's been ongoing forever, we did feel like after George Floyd that a lot of companies went out and made public facing statements about what they were committed to doing in support of Black Lives Matter and general DEI initiatives, and really focused on, you know, what they would be looking at internally. And I think while that was good, and those are good public statements, they could also be viewed as, you know, self-serving and maybe not having a lot of teeth behind it, right? So I do say one of the really big key elements of advice that I would give to employers is to put your money where your mouth is on that topic. There should be people or an individual who owns that initiative, almost like you would the sales initiative, the revenue initiative within your company. There should be budget allocated to it, and it should be something that's reported upon in your quarterly reports. A really great example of a company who made this an initiative is Salesforce.com. Go and look at one of their 4 key values is equality. They have an entire web page, their public facing web page tells you their equality stats, their pay gaps, what they're doing to actually fix those pay gaps, you know, how many veterans they employ, how many people who identify as LGBTQ, what their, you know, what the racial and gender divide looks like for their organization. It's amazing. And they report on it every quarter, and they've got goals and KPIs and budget and headcount dedicated to that. So that's a really great example. The other thing that I think is particularly insightful right now that I've been seeing some companies do that I think is amazing is, especially with COVID and the way it's affecting everyone, you're seeing a lot of working women leave the workforce now, right? Setting us back 40 years, 50 years, right, of making some progress with both pay and representation within leadership roles and just in general. So one thing that I've seen some organizations do is job sharing. So acknowledging that people may not be able to work the typical 40, 50-hour weeks anymore, but could they do part-time? So job sharing opportunities for people who still want to stay invested in the company and a part of the company, but the opportunity to be able to not have to do as much work, especially during this, this unprecedented time.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, I will add that. Thank you, Lisa and Bridget. I will add that for employers and leadership, I would encourage you all to look at hiring diversity staff, not just as a HR or PR decision, but actually as a business decision. Hiring diverse staff is a good business decision because there are numerous researchers out there, studies saying a more diverse team, a more inclusive team actually performs much better financially and economically compared to companies that are dominant by white people or white men. So I truly believe that a diverse and inclusive team is a more profitable and it makes more financial sense. So I would look at hiring a diverse team actually as a business decision, not HR.
Yeah, no argument here. I think that's fantastic. One thing you brought up, Bridget, that is an important piece is kind of that transparency. And there is a lack of transparency within organizations about pay scales and opportunities, et cetera. What are some simple steps that an organization could institute to ensure that they are addressing this?
So I do think, I mean, I've actually been seeing in HR panels, people discussing that they publicize what everyone makes. I mean, we know it for C-level, anybody who you can actually look at the quarterly report and be able to see. But if you were able to actually see that they're, someone who's been at the company maybe even less amount of time than you are, and the two of you are actually not making the same amount. I'll give you a perfect example. I joined an organization and then became that organization's leader, and it was surprising to me that I then was able to see everyone's pay scale. And I was shocked, and I maybe shouldn't have been so shocked, that my former leader had brought us in at the exact same level, literally to the penny, the exact same level. And I was so heartened by that, right? So I do think that showing transparency and being honest and open about what people are making, or even going, the ranges are this, the experience level is this is what we pay you, and having a consistent almost matrix of it, matrix, to make it as open and honest as possible and transparent as possible.
Anything you guys want to add to that before we move on? Great. I want to close here with what advice would you give women and minorities as they grow their own careers in tech? And what are some key steps they could take to ensure they have success and navigate what is sometimes a pretty white male dominated world?
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, ask for the job. I think this circles back to the self-doubt, right? Not feeding yourself and your inner voice saying, I don't have all the qualities. I don't need it to the T. It's okay. You're going to learn the job. And I love the story that Bridget shared when she went through that phase of self-doubting and didn't feel as though she was as qualified as the other males. Otherwise, if we stay in this position of humble and just self-doubt, we're not going to be able to raise ourselves, and most importantly, raise other women into the role of leadership. I think that ties into look for a mentor, whether it's a male or a female. It's important to have someone that's going to be your guide, that's going to help you navigate through business and through the organization. And then once you reach the level that you're happy with, or whatever level you're at, return the favor, be a mentor to someone else. I think that's really important to keep feeding into that.
I love that. I love that. It's basically, as you rise in your career, don't forget that someone gave you an opportunity, and bring those people with you. There was one time I was in a board meeting, and it was all white males and me. And I will never forget that someone said, well, you know, we can't hire women because they just get pregnant. And I couldn't believe that I was the only one, and I was the only one brave in that room to go, you've got to be kidding that you just said that. And the HR person's sitting there, no one's saying anything. And once I did, other people did, right? They said, yeah, that was, we can't have and now it was something that was addressed outside of that room as well. But it was one of those things where if you would feel so comfortable saying that, and for you to not be brave enough, or for me to not be brave enough, I would have been letting down myself. I would have been letting down all of the women that I love and that I work with. And so I think there's something really to that bravery, finding allies in the room who support you. And then as you grow, make sure that you're returning that favor.
Yeah, and I will add that for minorities and women, people of color, I think it's people, myself, for example, for the longest time, I was like, should I really ask for that raise? And the first time I walked into that room, I was just nervous. So what I will say to minorities, women, people of color is we gonna know our worth, and we gonna do our homework, and we have to be able to say, this is what I want because I'm worth it. And another point is that oftentimes people are women are seen as, you know, emotional, etc., or sometimes assertive or rude, etc. I once was called, someone called me being authoritative. I sounded authoritative. It's like, that's because I'm right. So don't be afraid of being called assertive. I think we have to remain assertive. And last but not least, I agree. A good mentor is vital for everyone's career growth. And for some reason, it is so much easier for white men to find a mentor. But for women and people of color, we also need to seek that mentor that will help you and assist you along the way. And when you reach your career goals, don't forget to pay it forward.
Thank you so much, Bridget, Lisa, Joe. You are an amazing panel. I truly appreciate having you guys here today. Talking about bravery, the bravery of coming up and talking about this topic today is something that's really incredible to me as well. I just really thank you for that, and honored to have you guys be a part of our organization.